All right. So welcome to all of our panelists as well as our students who are joining us. Every one of these panelists has in some way earned a degree within the College of International Studies, either their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, both in some cases. Some were double majors, minors in other colleges, and they bring a wealth of information as to how they have gotten where they are now, what they did after graduation, what they did, their senior year. And I just want them to be able to share that with students because we're kind of in the thick of these seniors trying to decide what their next steps are, and even juniors who are preparing for that. So I'd like to just kind of go around briefly, everyone on the panel, for just a couple of minutes to explain who you are, what degree you earned from OU, maybe what degrees you've earned since leaving OU, and essentially the path you took to get where you are now as far as career goes, and obviously ultimately where you are now as far as your career. So I'm just going to kind of call on people in my alphabetical order here. And so Bailey, that puts you up first if you'll fill it up.
I should have known. It's always that way, isn't it? So hi, my name's Bailey. I graduated from the College of International Studies in spring of 2021. I did the accelerated bachelor's and master's degrees, so I got both of them basically at once. So yeah, bachelor's in international studies. And is it global studies technically that the master's is in? I feel like I put it down different every application I have to put down things on. So yeah, and then I got minors in Arabic and Spanish as well. And I pivoted from foreign policy and international development to more domestic policy and local development. I work at a local nonprofit called Hunger Free Oklahoma. I'm the senior policy analyst there. So I work in government relations and policy analysis with the nonprofit in food security policy, mainly domestically, but who knows, one day. I always joke that we'll go international. So that's been really cool because food security policy, I work mostly with the food assistance programs, and those are both federally and state administered. So I get to dabble in both of those areas. And I guess that's it. I'll pass it on to whoever's next.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Let's see here. I think Brad is going to be next for us. Go. Did we lose him? Oh, no, it's not. Oh, here comes a couple people in and out. Okay, we'll move on to Jackie Nicole.
Hi, y'all. My name is Jackie Nicole Iyoko. Some people do call me Stephanie, which is my middle name. And I graduated from OU in 2016 with a dual degree in Mandarin Chinese and also international studies, focusing on Asian studies, and studied abroad in China. I went there for my undergrad. I spent a year and a half there. And then after that, I actually went and got my master's in energy resources and environment at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. And while I was there, I did a dual degree program at the Hopkins Nanjing Center in Nanjing, China. I also did a bit of a pivot, and I'm currently working at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission up in Washington, D.C., and we're responsible for the regulation of transmission here in the United States. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's see, I think we've got Priscilla next.
Hi everyone. Sorry. I'm Priscilla Gomez, and I finished my master's at OU in the spring of 2014 already. So I was an international student, so I couldn't find much opportunities within the US given my status. So I quickly looked outside of the US. So after finishing, I worked in the Gambia. I was a consultant there at the Ministry of Education. After that, I worked in Senegal, where I worked for a regional international organization focusing on education. And then I moved to Chad, still in Africa, where I worked with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So that was 6 years ago. I was in charge of education, refugee education, and I moved in went in March of this year to Amman in Jordan, and now I still work for the UNHCR, but I'm working more in external relations, donor relations, and I work with Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq mainly. And yeah, I think that's and I also worked a little bit in Tijuana at the border, also with UNHCR last year. That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Taz, I think you're next.
Good afternoon. I'm Taz Ingram. I graduated with my bachelor's from OU in International Studies in 2018, and then went on to do my master's, which I finished in 2020, right when the pandemic started. Since then, I did a couple internships, one with U.S. Northern Command and North American Aerospace and Defense in Colorado Springs. And then immediately after finishing the master's program, I interned for the company I work for now, which is Answer. It's a contractor out here in Northern Virginia. I'm currently living in Washington, D.C. And so I'm on contract with the Department of Defense. I work for an acquisition investment program within the DoD. And so I'm leading portfolios for rare earth elements, which I had no idea what those were until I got here, but essentially think the bottom of the periodic table. And then I also do the hypersonic investment for this program. And so I work with the Navy and the Army quite a bit, as well as a lot of different interagency partners across the DoD and the U.S. government. And so been doing that for just over 2 years now. And so around the area. I think that's it for me, unless I missed anything. Also from Oklahoma originally, if we were saying that.
Awesome. Thank you. Derek?
Hey y'all, I'm Derek. I'm born and raised in Oklahoma City. Graduated in 2016 with a general IAS degree, currently a fourth year med student here at OU College of Medicine. So if any of you are looking for the health track, let me know.
Absolutely. Aislinn?
Hi, everyone. I'm Aislinn O'Banion. I'm originally from the Dallas area. I graduated from OU from the 5-year accelerated bachelor's and master's program back in 2021. I also had minors in French and non-governmental organizations. And for last year, I moved back home. I worked with the International Rescue Committee in Dallas in a resettlement, asylum, and integration office. So we were a refugee resettlement office, also serving asylum seekers and immigrants in the Dallas area. I was the donations coordinator, so I worked a lot with fundraising, donor relations, and just making sure all of our clients had what they needed when they arrived to Dallas. So I did that for the last year, but as we were talking about earlier, I recently moved. I'm now in Sweden and am looking for more work in the field. So it's been really interesting, and I loved working in a nonprofit in Dallas. So
Awesome. Jackson?
Thanks, Tracy. Good to see everyone. Jackson Studeville. I got my master's in international studies, graduated in 2019. I just after graduation moved to DC, and I've done a few things since then. Right when I moved to DC, I worked on the Hill for former member of Congress, Kendra Horn. So I worked for her for about 5 or 6 months, sort of in a defense fellowship type of role. She was on the House Armed Services Committee, so I got to do a lot of fun work there. And then when she lost her reelection bid, I went to work for a consulting firm in DC on a FEMA Homeland Security contract, and I did that for about a year. And I recently, about a year ago, made a very interesting pivot and accepted a job with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma in the Government Relations Department. Hadn't done any tribal work before. I'm a tribal member, but I was living in DC, and they were looking to place someone in DC full time and do all of their policy and political work. So I've been with the nation for about a year. I do everything from gaming policy to environmental policy to work on food security issues. Pretty much working for a tribal nation with over 200,000 employees, you're going to touch every issue area under the sun. So it's been an interesting past year and a half trying to learn all of those different policy areas, but it's been really enjoyable. And I also get to do, like I said, the political side of things. So in an election year, I go to a lot of fundraisers, support our candidates who are good allies for us, but also other tribal nations as well. So that's what I've done since 2019.
And John?
Hello all, I'm John Zubialdi and graduated from College of International Studies in 2014 with my bachelor's in international security. After that, I went to law school and graduated from law school in 2017 and took the bar, passed the bar in Texas. During law school, I kind of pivoted, well, actually it was pivot towards. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do after international studies bachelor, but knew that to do anything like State Department or CIA or something like that, I needed to have an advanced degree most likely. So I decided to go with my Juris Doctorate because I was a little bit partial towards that and do a lot of things with it. So I did that, graduated in 2017. While I was at law school, I decided I really liked international negotiations and contracts. So decided to go work that direction if I could. Have been working with Raytheon Technologies for about 5 years since graduation from law school, and my focus area is direct sale of military and defense equipment to foreign governments. So negotiation of major international defense sales with foreign governments, as well as local participation agreements for local economic development in the countries where we're selling our items. So that's what I do, and that's where I'm at right now.
Great. And Brad, I'm sorry I was having technical difficulties with you. Hopefully we can hear you now.
Thanks. Am I coming through okay? Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through great.
Okay, great. So my name's Brad Crawford. I did my master's in international studies at the University of Oklahoma, graduating in 2015. So then after graduating from OU, I moved to Wisconsin for a year to be closer to my wife while she finished up law school. So I worked at Technical Writers, a software company, then moved to Iowa for a year and worked at a call center while my wife did her first clerkship out of law school. And so then after that, we moved to DC. And in DC, I worked in legislative affairs, government relations for a higher education association. So I did that for about a year and a half, and then moved to the Government Accountability Office through their entry-level program. So I spent 2 years rotating through teams. So I spent time on the defense team, the education team, and the Homeland Security and Justice team before placing on the defense team permanently. So in this role, I do performance audits of federal agencies focused on defense. So things like I've looked at quality of life for Air Force drone pilots, treatment for civilians at military hospitals, and some other various topics. Oh, and not from Oklahoma per se, mostly grew up abroad to missionary parents, but I did go to high school, college, and grad school in Oklahoma. And apologies for the video. Had some tech issues, so we're trying to be flexible here. So apologies for any weird angles.
And I know we had Matt on here for a bit. I'm not sure if we lost him. Matt, are you here?
Matt is at an event for work and had to jump, unfortunately, but he did say that he misses everyone and wants to wish everyone well.
Awesome. Well, we'll include him again next time. So I think that something that students tend to like to hear is, how did you prepare for your next steps when you were graduating? Did you partake in any career services resources on campus or off? What sort of a job search did you do? You know, what did you do within your last 6 months or so of before graduation to make your next leap? Did you go directly into grad school? Did you go into employment? Did you get a paid or unpaid internship? Just anyone that wants to type in, feel free.
So from my perspective, I went straight into law school, but the reason I did so was because I wanted to give myself the best shot, I think, at some of the job opportunities I wanted. It's, pretty competitive in the DC area. And so I, wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I wanted to do something international or related to foreign policy. So at that point, I was like, well, I'm just going to try to fill the toolbox with as many tools as I can get. So I went back to law school. Following law school, however, For me, the track that I was wanting to go on with international contracts is not something that a lot of lawyers go directly into. In fact, not many ever go directly into. So what I just started doing was basically putting together a list of the types of experience that I wanted to get, like what are the things that I want to learn, what are the things I want to do, putting together a list, and then just starting to looking for jobs that match those descriptions versus jobs that match a title, right? So that's kind of how I ended up in contract management with Raytheon, and gotten to do a lot of stuff that would not have ever had a chance to do if I hadn't gone this route. So.
Great. Anyone
I'll
else
jump
have
in.
anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in right after that. I think some others might be able to sympathize with this because I started out as an aerospace engineer and did that for about 2 years at OU. Calculus wasn't my strong suit, so I switched degrees. For anyone who's listened to this who's switched into international relations, I kind of spent 2 years trying to figure out what someone does with an international relations degree. I just knew I had a friend who was passing, and I switched into it and ended up really loving the idea and the studies that we did there. And so that's ultimately why, the same reason that, I'm sorry, I forget, I think, was it Matt who just spoke before me, but he wanted to make himself a little bit more competitive. So that's why I considered the master's program as well at OU, especially talking to Dr. Cruz and Katie and Tracy here. So ended up getting there, really refining the skills as far as writing goes. And then coming into the pandemic, it was hard to judge what getting hired in the early months of COVID-19 was going to look like, if anyone was getting hired. So that was a pretty unique situation, I think. Ended up really just Googled the title of, I think I just Googled non-proliferation jobs. And for some reason, the company that I stumbled across showed up. And I don't work in nuclear non-proliferation of any kind, but that's what I was writing my thesis on. And so I just started applying to jobs that sounded interesting. I don't know if that's like the greatest advice to go forward, but it worked out for me at this point because I would just go through and, not knowing where I wanted to be exactly, I figured, DoD was always interesting. So I just went down different contractors and found out what different contracts activity looked like, and eventually was offered a position in manufacturing. And I just told them, I said, hey, I don't know anything about US manufacturing or the industrial base. Are you sure? And they were like, you're a great writer. You have that skill. That's really all we need you to come in and support with to start. So all of that to say, encourage just looking for something that sounds interesting and be really open-minded when something comes back that's not exactly what you were expecting. Because you never really know where you're going to find yourself. But as far as students who are in IR go, we're all typically strong writers, strong critical thinkers, and we deal with complex systems. And so that applies to a lot of different industries. You don't have to be defense specific. You don't have to be law specific or contracts. I know we have people here, refugee in the refugee ICR, I think International Committee for Refugees. So it's very flexible. So be open-minded and really just look around, shop around. The IR degree can go in a lot of different directions and fill a lot of different wants, is what I would add. Thanks.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of that because, oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, sorry. I just a couple very specific things I did to prepare. So this is Brad. I wanted to keep a hand in international studies because I recognized that moving to kind of a small town in Iowa was my goal. There were going to be limited opportunities there. So I was trying to figure out how to keep a hand in international studies. So one thing I did is I ended up writing academic book reviews for some journals. It kept me reading books about Africa, about international development, kind of kept that part of myself engaged. And then I also looked for opportunities to use French. So when I ended up moving to Wisconsin, I found a local group that's, practiced speaking French socially, found a way to get plugged in at the corporation where I worked, kind of assisting with translations as a sort of side gig. So kind of whatever you do next, I think it's helpful to think about how to keep a hand in international studies if you end up in a position where it won't be your career immediately. One other very specific thing I did is I took an intensive course over the summer, like a 1-week intensive course. And what that did was it freed up more time in my final semester. So that instead of taking 9 credit hours, I was taking 6 for my master's. That freed up a lot of time and kind of energy to focus on a job search. So it may not be practical for everyone, but it is one way to kind of think, how can you make space and time in your final semester for the job search? Because it is time.
I'll pop in now if it's safe.
And sorry, back to you.
Thanks. I was going to echo Tazin's point because something pretty similar happened to me. Through my degree, I knew I wanted to work in policy and programming, be part of the programs in nonprofits and non-governmental organizations that serve clients, work in a client-facing position. But because I found the International Rescue Committee had an office in Dallas, and I knew that that was a recognizable name, a recognizable logo, that if I moved abroad, people would be like, oh, okay, we know what she did. So I actually ended up in a donor-facing position. And I was surprised by that because I didn't have a degree in nonprofit administration or in business, but being in donor and community-facing positions is actually really interesting. You get a great opportunity to share a mission of an organization or of a company. So I want to, I guess, encourage people to, kind of like Tazin was talking about, to be a little creative and kind of think outside the box, because you never know what might actually really click, what might be great for you. So if anyone has any questions about, I know we had someone else who was talking about donor relations, but resource development and the back end of stuff like this, let me know, because it actually is a really cool field to be in. So
feel free to still pipe in. Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. Yeah.
So I'm going to echo, obviously, everything everyone has just said. I think some really important points were made. And I will also say that whenever I was at OU, one of my professors, I believe it was Kong Lauscher, he reminded me of two things. He was like, yes, it's important to know a language, and like you should, but also find your expertise. And at the time, I was in his energy security class, and I realized at that moment that I wanted to work in energy, but I was trying to figure out a way to use both my Mandarin language skills, but then also trying to build an expertise in this like very niche area. And what I did was, obviously, like I ended up going to the Hopkins Nanjing Center, which was very helpful for me, and he helped me through that entire process. But I was able to practice my language skills in an area, in a field that I am working in now, because I knew in the future I wanted to like circle back to Mandarin. Like right now, I work for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and my portfolio includes everything here in the United States. So anything that crosses interstate commerce, anything like that, like I focus on. And because of that, I know that in the future, if I want to work on China's carbon markets again, I totally can, because I have that background and I also have that language. So I encourage anyone like in this field for like IR, we are a bunch of generalists that write really well. And I think Tazen mentioned this, like we have really impressive critical thinking skills, but it's also really important to find a topic, like find something that you're really passionate about that you can talk about in said language.
Awesome, that is very good advice. And you all have touched upon this a bit, but if you want to expand, how did you find your interest or your strong suit? Did you talk to professors here? What did you go out and, sort of hit the ground doing? And also, what skills do you feel your OU degrees developed? You've all mentioned writing and maybe foreign language. What other skills can our students advertise on their resumes or try to build and pursue?
If I may jump in quickly, because I'm not going to be able to stay the whole hour, and I'll try to answer both questions at once. And hi, Brad. I was in class with Brad, so it's so nice to see him. So like I said earlier, I was an international student, so maybe some other would listen later. I think it was also a bit trickier because I went to a career fair, but quickly realized that my status was very limited, because unless you're a STEAM student, it's super hard to find a sponsorship. And I very quickly gave up on looking for opportunities within the US, which I was fine with because that was not really what I was looking for necessarily. I was very lucky to be a TA. So I worked very closely with a few professors, and particularly one that helped me pretty much explore my passion, because before I came to OU as an exchange student and then decided to come back and do my master's. But before that, I wanted to be a teacher. So I always had some passion for education. And being a native French speaker, I gravitated more towards also Francophone countries. So I ended up doing an internship in Senegal. And that ended up being my second real job. So, and thanks to the professor who put me in touch with the right people. So I think also if you have a professor that shares same interest, I worked with him and then ended up going to the Gambia working with the ministry because he was doing a World Bank case study with them. So that's how I basically got my first foot and then got my next job. And also, yeah, like Jacqueline said, find something like being specialized is very important. And for me, I focused on development education, and I took a bunch of statistic classes, which happened to be very, very useful for my job in the Gambia, then my job in Senegal, and then that's how I ended up moving to my next job and then getting into the UN. So I think that's quite important. And yeah, I would say for me the statistical skills were very important because in the end the degree is useful for a lot of things, because now I'm back in something more generalist, donor relations and a bit of political science, and completely switched region also, which I was not an expert. But I would also say, yeah, language would also be very important. In my case, I speak 4, and that has come super useful, especially because, I mean, if you, for me, the most important after college was to get the field experience. And so, and then to enter in the UN, I went through a hardship country, which was Chad, and I had to speak French, and that was very useful to actually speak French, but also English. To have a US degree was also super useful. So I'll say definitely your language skills would be a plus when applying.
Awesome. Thank you, Priscilla. I know you have to leave before too long. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And anyone else who, go ahead.
The second question. Will you remind me of what it was?
How did you find out what your special skill set is, and how did you build it, and what do you feel the IAS degree did to help you build those skill sets, or what can students market from OU's international studies degrees on their resume or as a skill set?
A few things. One, I'm going to, again, go back to Priscilla's point here about language program. So not only did I did Mandarin, I also did German at OU. And I still speak German because of German at OU. So that is definitely, I will say that we have really, really good teachers, like really good language professors. So I would try to spend as much time as you can with the language professors at our OU, and then also see if any of them cross over. So does your language professor also teach another class? For me, for Mandarin, for example, like my professor, he was teaching the energy security classes as well. He wasn't the Mandarin professor, but I knew I could practice with him. You know what I mean? So like making sure that you have some sort of crossover. And then also too, I took maybe 2 or 3 math classes outside of the required ones that I needed at OU. And I am so grateful, because when I went to SAIS, I mean, it's an IR degree, but it's also an economics degree, and you have to be prepared for that. So I cannot echo enough how much you should spend. Take the calcs, take statistics, I'm going to say that one more time, take stats, because you will use it. I use stats every single day of my life. So those are like my 2 big important points. Like, yes, you're getting an IR degree, but then also spend time learning those like fundamental skills as well. Creative writing I took also at OU, and that one is also like one of those like wild cards where you like don't think you need it, but then your boss asks you to just like come up with something, and all of a sudden you're tapping back into those creative writing courses that you took. So yeah, those are my top 3.
I want to hop in and just say, yeah, statistical analysis, econometrics, like, especially if you're a junior or senior right now, take those courses, because there are so many positions out there that I see know how to use R, Stata, all that stuff. I'm actually learning R, the programming language, if you're not familiar, myself right now for that exact reason, so I can expand my skill set and do more data analysis and visualizations. And going back to finding your niche, and also just maybe expanding the concept of what sort of policy positions and IR applicable things there are out there, because almost every like larger business or anywhere is going to have a government relations department, and they're going to specialize in a field of policy. And even if that's not international policy, it could be international policy one day, and they want somebody who has those policy analysis skills or knows how to have the patience to read through legislative text and things like that. I actually found my position because I was working on a research project the last semester of my master's program, and I interviewed my current supervisor for the research project. I was looking at SNAP, the food stamps program, and the impact of food insecurity in Oklahoma. And if you don't know, Oklahoma does not have a lot of policy-focused organizations or people necessarily in it, which makes it not great for finding a job necessarily. But at the time, my organization was looking for a policy person, and I was one of the only people who knew much about the food security landscape in Oklahoma at the time and had like a policy relevant background in Oklahoma. So that was very advantageous to me. I also think just having that name recognition with my supervisor, soon to be supervisor at the time, was very helpful. I'm not gonna lie either, I struggled to find a job after I graduated from my master's program. I worked at a fancy restaurant for like 3 or 4 months while I was looking for jobs. And so I just want people to have realistic expectations about if you are struggling to find internships or jobs, especially in the DC area, it's very competitive and very, very nepotism, I should say. Don't feel bad about yourself, and just find those positions that will invest in you and your growth, and let those lead you to new avenues. Be open about it, because yeah, if you try to just like slam your head against like the USA jobs, State Department, like all that UN wall, like you're going to get very bummed out very quickly. Yes, and statistical analysis, econometrics, learn it.
I'm going to go back a little bit to Bailey's point, because I don't think a lot of people really grasp that. It takes a long time to find a job. Like the turnaround, like I know we graduate and we think we're going to have something by tomorrow, and like that's just like not the reality of it. It takes up to 7 to 8 months to get that turnaround. But to that point, make sure you are talking to people. Like make friends, cold call people. Like the amount of people that I had to get in my corner for me to get the job that I have today is a long list. And I made sure I thanked every last one of them that had had any kind of anything to do with the steps that I took. So talk to a lot of people. Like find people on LinkedIn, like the alumni network that we have at OU is really useful. There are actually a lot of people that went to the University of Oklahoma that live in DC. I know a few of them. Some of them live in China or like in Taiwan or like wherever. And like some of them are on this call today. But like making friends is very important, because like Bailey mentioned, nepotism is real, and you want to be at the other side of that. Like you want to be plugged in because you knew someone too, because everyone is doing it. And why not you?
Yeah, and I want to sort of build on that, Stephanie, and say that this is just general career advice, but I feel especially pertinent in DC, that if you are fortunate enough to get an internship in DC, don't assume that people aren't watching you, because your supervisors, your managers, people that you work for, I know sometimes internships can seem, a little boring or nonchalant or whatever, but if you are fortunate enough to get one, always assume that someone is watching you, because they are. They're taking notice of the kind of work that you're doing, and those are going to be the people who, when you come to them at the end of your internship and say, oh, I'm interested in this job, or I'm interested in doing this or that, they're going to give you guidance, but they may not always give you that guidance, or they may not always give you that recommendation if they don't think that you're capable of doing the work, or that you don't want to do the work, or what have you. So that's just a very long way of saying, don't ever assume that people aren't paying attention to the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah, Jack, I think that's a great point.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, guys. I go
No,
quick.
go ahead.
It's a little hard. That's a great point regarding the internships and people watching. I know, for example, at the GAO where I work, a lot of the entry-level hiring for analysts, like the position I'm in, comes from, having interns come, and then, if they perform well, then eventually converting those into analysts. So moving from an internship to a full-time position when they graduate. So internships can be a really valuable entryway, especially for some larger organizations where there's space to take on.
Yeah, and I wanted
Sorry,
to
back over to you.
kind of go back and kind of pull on the thread of, what you can do to kind of build your market your capabilities right now. And so, we all know that it's, getting a job is hard. I mean, it took me probably 4 or 5 months worth of searching. Granted, I was waiting for my bar results for passing my boards. So it was like, well, I'm going to be waiting anyways, right? But it still took me like, I would say 5 months of pretty tough searching. But I think knowing that it's, it's going to be difficult, knowing that you're going to have to build those connections, what can you do today in addition to building the connections, or how can you make those connections, right? And I think that making connections is a lot easier when you have talking points and things that you can bond with people over. So like some of the things that, you can do while you're in school is, employers really like to see how you're able to take what you learn in school and plug that into real world situations, or how would you be able to think critically using that educational background and apply it in a real life situation. And some of it's difficult, right? Because how do you do that when you haven't had a job yet? And I think one area that you can do that in is doing research and doing projects while you're in school. So if you get the opportunity to work with a professor on writing a paper that is regarding policy and how it impacts businesses, policy and how it impacts government legislation, or food security and how it relates to geopolitical stability, things like that you can work with a professor on, or work with a faculty member on, or someone, and just kind of put together, build a little bit of a research or resume for yourself in terms of just research and work and writing that you've done on your own. And if you have opportunities while you're in school to take classes that are more like workshops. So I was able to get into a class during law school that was a human rights and business workshop, where we all basically worked together to write a lot of do research and write papers that were amalgamated together as part of a package that went to the US State Department to kind of help them see where the areas are between business and law and policy, where companies that are doing work overseas are struggling to meet human rights requirements and be responsible, but at the same time work in countries that are not necessarily friendly to human rights. So if you can find some of those opportunities to say, yeah, not only do I have that degree, right, but I also have done research in this area, and I've written on these topics, and I can provide you, actually, if you ask, I can provide you with some of my work, and I'm more than happy to provide you with samples of my writing or my research work. I think then it's a lot easier to kind of start those conversations, and you can always include some of your research or your writing or the work that you've done during school on the academic side in your applications. And for my case, I just landed an interview because my boss, they only interview people in the Northeast. I live in the Boston area now. They never interview people generally be from the middle of the country. But when I submitted my application, it had my business and human rights paper in there. And my boss happened to be doing an LLM on the side while she was at work, on human rights and business. It's very important, especially in areas like big defense companies like mine, like Raytheon. So she was just like, oh, this guy's doing business and human rights. And it just kind of sparked her interest. So she gave me that interview, right? So it's not impossible to find a way in. It's just, how do you build those areas where people are like, oh yeah, I'm totally interested in that, and they want to have that conversation with you. And as soon as you start, just getting involved in just doing things and and building kind of that collection, that work and research and history and resume, people will want to ask you more about it, and they'll see your interview, your resume and your work portfolio, and they'll want to ask you more about it. So I think that's kind of an area while you're at school is, finding projects that allow you to cross into the business area while you're still in school, so that when you're looking for a job, you have some talking points and some things you can bond with people over, or have coffee with people over, or have those conversations. So that's long-winded, I'm sorry, but it's it doesn't seem necessarily intuitive at the time. I wouldn't have thought that that was what was going to get me a job. I was like, I have to do another paper. I don't like this. Like, I guess this is useful, right? Well, lucky me. Like, I'm super glad I did it, because if I hadn't written that paper and been a part of that that project, who knows if I'd be sitting here today. So take every opportunity you can.
If I may, sorry, I have 2 points. They're a bit unrelated, one to the other, but I think also on campus, something that for me has really helped me was to be involved with organizations. We're quite lucky at OU to have like endless organizations, and I was involved in a few of them. So you create connections, but you also build on some soft skills that can be then useful, especially when you start having your internships. You can relate to those activities to your internships. Another thing, and that, I mean, it's a bit hard to navigate, I think, to go and look for your first job, especially if you're like a first generation university student and like your family is not at all in this. I mean, it can be very overwhelming. And I think for me, having a few professors actually that I was very close to and that really helped me out and supported me was very helpful. And I like I said, I came to OU as an exchange student, and that's actually one professor that encouraged me to come back. She's gone now, Robin Greer. She's really great. I really loved her. And then that's another professor, Musa Blimpo, who helped me get my internship and then my first job, etc. And really, it's very, very helpful because they know the people. We don't know the people in the end, but they work with a bunch of people, and that's how you make your connections, and they see your work, and that's very helpful. I don't know if it's still happening, but I remember when I was a master's student, we had a mentor professor, so that's how it was super helpful. And then another point, but that's a bit after, if you're looking into development and humanitarian career, field experience is super important. So get that field experience early on, especially in your private life. It's easier to move around when you might not have yet a family and all, because getting the UN job is not easy. You go on the website and have this young professional program thing, and I was looking at them, but it's not easy. And personally, to work in the UN now, it's not been the easy journey and applying and just getting something. I started as a UN volunteer. You get paid for it actually quite well, and there's a website where you can register, and then you just need like a year or two of experience, and then working the way through it, then ended up as international civil servant. But it doesn't fall from the sky, and now when I recruit someone, I really looked at that field experience. Has that person been in the field, get out of the comfort zone? I think that's super important, on top, of course, of, like we said, statistics and languages.
I want to add to that because I'm also a first generation, and making friends with my professors single-handedly helped me in my life. Like, it's actually really, really important. So I want to echo Priscilla's point on that. And then two things. One, the diplomacy lab. I'm not sure if OU still does this, but I did a diplomacy lab on human trafficking, and we're working with State Department. And I promise you, so helpful, because you get a plug in. These people already work in DC, and like, you're basically their intern for a year. So, and then you produce this really long paper at the end with your name on it and their names on it. And I think that is really helpful. Like, you learn how to write a research document for the context of the Department of State. Second thing, I tell my mentees this all the time: turn your research papers into 3 to 5 pages. Like, in university, they give you these, like, write 20 pages about conflict in the Gambia, or write whatever. make sure you are taking those longer form and turning them into those 3 to 5 pages, because sometimes a lot of jobs ask you to submit like work that you've written, and to have the ability to synthesize your work is one of the most important skills that you can learn in this life. So those are like 2 big things, Diplomacy Lab, but then also turning your research papers into those 3 to 5 pages. Super helpful.
Yep. Want to jump in and foot stomp that just from the Department of Defense side, which is a different track than the UN, but the exact same thing was true. They asked, they said that they wanted just to see a sample of my writing, and I said I had a 55-page paper, and they said, yeah, just give me the first 3 pages of that, and I gave it, and that ultimately is what they read, and they were like, oh, this is great. Yeah, we'll go from there. So definitely that applies to probably any industry where they're going to be writing. So that, I think that's a great point. Want to throw my head on that one too. It works. I wish I would have done that.
That's a really
Yeah, these
excellent
are all
point.
great points. And I just want to, if I may, I just want to give kind of an example of weaving this through with like working connections and with people. When I was in DC in college, I needed an internship. I landed an internship through a small consulting company whose like president my parents knew because they were missionaries. So working the personal connection to get an internship. They were impressed with my writing. So then a few years later, when I finished my master's at OU, they reached out again like, hey, can you write a white paper about this topic? We just want to learn more about it. So I wrote a white paper. So then a few years later, when I was actually looking to move out to DC, I got permission to use that as my writing sample, and that writing sample landed me the job. So my first job in government relations here in DC. So it was that thing of starting with a personal connection, got me an internship. The internship got me an opportunity to then get more opportunities down the road with the white paper. That white paper became a writing sample. The writing sample became a job. So just kind of connecting that over time, and you know, turning the work you do into something that you can keep using again.
Well, I want to start kind of summarizing and wrapping things up. So I just want to, you know, put things together like we've talked about, and give everybody a chance for some last minute comments to allow us to finish within this hour. But essentially, I think what we've learned is it's not easy. Take your time, be patient. Don't necessarily be discouraged if it's not your first job choice, or you know, if it doesn't you know, do a whole lot more than pay the bills to get you to your next step. Every little interaction is important. It could not be the person that chooses you for the job, but it could be someone else that knows that person. Have some brief writing samples, you know, under 5 pages, and don't be afraid to submit those with resumes and cover letters. Definitely make friends with professors, make those connections. Again, don't be nervous to reach out, whether that be just as a, you know, go in and chat on office hours, or actually try to approach them about a possible research connection. Don't get discouraged and just keep at it and make those connections. So I would love it if anyone has any last minute parting thoughts of anything we didn't cover or they'd like to expand upon.
I want to take a second and plug some internship opportunities. So working in the resource development department, my closest coworker was our volunteer coordinator. And she is also over all of our internship program at the International Rescue Committee in Dallas. So if you have any at all interest in refugees, immigration law, human rights, migration, conflict, anything remotely related, a social work type of path where you are working with like as a caseworker, anything like that, I really encourage you to reach out to the IRC in Dallas. I know a lot of Oklahoma grads end up in Dallas. It's a great place to be. And it's a really wonderful starting point, because I'm not going to lie, like the IRC takes a lot of interns and would be super stoked to get an email from any of y'all. So, and I've already plugged like how great the OU college is, like everyone knows. So I'm going to go ahead and put the email that you can contact in the chat. It's volunteerdallas@rescue.org. I'll write that out for everybody, but I really encourage you, like it's a wonderful internship program, and I'm not gonna lie, it's like significantly easier than a State Department internship or anything like that. So no shame in exploring your options and maybe taking an easy route sometimes. So I would love for y'all to reach out to them because they have a lot of really wonderful internship opportunities.
I appreciate that. That does bring us to that topic. If anyone else is willing to share their contact information or the information for their organization, please go ahead and put it in the chat to everyone now. I don't want to share anyone's contact information without their permission. So please, if you're willing, that will make it through on the recording. And so please feel free to at least put a website, if not your own personal email that you're comfortable with possible students contacting you, or if there's a link to internships or other contacts that you think would be helpful to students, please feel free.
I will also
And
plug.
Tracy, I'm on my phone, so we can't really. Oh, sorry, it will be hard to type in. But the GAO will be having paid internships opening up middle of next month. I'll send an email to Katie and Malin to send it out, and they'll have my contact information there. My last name, first initial at gao.com.
Perfect. We'll get that sent out soon. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Information for anyone who has an economics background who is looking to be a student trainee at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I will plug that in with Tracy. But as far as like my last piece of advice, this is not a sprint. It is in no way, shape, or form of sprints. The things that you do today will prepare you for things that you will end up doing later on in your life. And I just want everyone to remember that as they, make changes into their lives and graduate and all that fun stuff. It is a marathon, and keep going.
Also, just, this isn't probably the key thing, but, it never hurts to throw together a LinkedIn profile. That way, whenever you meet someone or you meet a professor or someone that's working with, in an industry or something, you can just, fire them an invitation over to there, or share your own information as well. So having a LinkedIn is just a good way to, just be able to quickly share your information with folks to help you network more easily.
And one last skill plug here that's helped me out a lot. Ask questions. There are no bad questions. Ask questions if you're in an interview. Ask questions if you come across someone. I know we're talking about, make friends, make connections, and have those sort of networking, but ask questions in those. I've asked a ton of questions, even as a junior analyst, all the way now to the senior analyst when I got brought on. And I'm only now realizing that I was asking because I was lost and confused. I had no idea what was going on, but the people have been like, oh, we're so appreciative that you ask questions and you come in, because it's better to reach out to someone and find that guidance and try and figure out yourself and run the risk of totally messing it up. So don't ever be afraid to ask questions of anybody at any point in this whole process that we've talked about, because it's been incredibly helpful. And I think that's a skill set in and of itself, is being able to come up with things to ask as you're going through all this. So good luck. And I sent my email as well if anyone ever just wants to talk. Defense and national security is the only career path I've been in for a few years, but willing to talk about my experience broader if anyone wants the time. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, if there are no last minute comments, I very much appreciate all of our alums joining us. This has been just what we hoped for it to be for the benefit of our students. And I really appreciate you being willing to be available today and in the future through contact for everyone. So if no one currently in the Zoom, current students have any other follow-up questions or anything, we'll go ahead and end it. Anybody else? All right. Thank you all again for joining us.
Thanks, Tracy. Good seeing everyone.
Good to see everyone.
Take care all.